High in the freezing, thin air of the Himalayas, geography works entirely against human survival. It is an intensely hostile, isolated landscape, and the perfect incubator for history's most stubborn biological mystery. For centuries, local villagers and Western mountaineers have returned from these peaks with remarkably consistent reports. They describe hearing strange, echoing calls across the mountain ridges and spotting shadowy, bipedal figures in the distance, disappearing into the tree line and finding enormous tracks pressed into the fresh powder. The core problem with these stories is the environment itself. Extreme cold, oxygen deprivation, and blinding whiteouts severely compromise human perception. An eyewitness account recorded at 20,000 feet is inherently unreliable. Without hard empirical evidence, the Yeti has lived in a frustrating gray zone. It was too widespread to dismiss entirely as a local fairy tale, but lacked the concrete proof required to be classified as a biological reality. But while scientists dismissed the eyewitness accounts, isolated mountain communities had quietly collected physical artifacts. In remote monasteries and local homes, believers had carefully preserved pieces of the myth. We are talking about specific, tangible objects: strands of coarse dark hair, fragmented pieces of bone, and dried pieces of skin, all attributed to the creature. Recently, a team of researchers decided to bypass the unreliable human testimonies entirely. They treated the Yeti legend exactly like a modern cold case, relying strictly on DNA sequencing. By bringing these ancient mountain relics into the laboratory, researchers subjected a cultural myth to a strict, undeniable forensic test for the very first time. The first step was sourcing the material. The research team managed to gather dozens of these disparate biological samples from across the vast, high-altitude regions of Tibet and Nepal. Once secured, laboratory technicians extracted whatever degraded genetic material still survived within the decades-old samples, preparing them for modern genomic sequencing. They fed the raw genetic data into a massive cross-referencing process, comparing the Himalayan samples against databases of thousands of known animal species. The goal was binary. They searched for a single genetic anomaly pointing to an undiscovered primate hiding in the snow. The genetic data returned a definitive answer. The Yeti DNA matched perfectly with ordinary, known wildlife. A few samples belonged to horses and dogs. The vast majority matched local species of brown and black bears. The sequence data dismantled the physical evidence entirely. There was no unknown monster in the test tubes, only the genetic signatures of common mountain mammals. If the physical evidence came from local wildlife, it raises an obvious logical question. How could so many experienced climbers and indigenous locals, people who know the mountains, be fooled? The answer lies in the extreme environmental mechanics of the Himalayas. Swirling snow and flat, low-light conditions strip away visual contrast and destroy depth perception. A familiar shape quickly becomes alien when obscured by a dense blizzard. Take the local brown bear. When it stands upright on its hind legs to get a better view, its silhouette naturally mimics the tall, bipedal posture of a human. Through blowing snow, a bear easily becomes a monster. And those massive footprints have a simple thermodynamic explanation. As this animation shows, an ordinary bear track pressed into the snow will melt and expand when exposed to the sun. The edges distort, turning a standard animal print into something massive and misshapen. The Yeti was constructed by the perfectly natural mechanics of extreme weather colliding with the innate flaws of human visual perception. For the scientific community, the forensic data closed the case. Every piece of testable physical evidence pointed squarely at misidentified wildlife. Yet the reports never stopped. To this day, fresh tracks are photographed and strange encounters are regularly reported by trekkers. Believers point out a valid statistical limitation. The tests only debunked the isolated samples brought from the mountains. Look at the map. The Himalayas cover 500,000 square miles of unexplored terrain, leaving a massive loophole for undiscovered biology. In the strict rules of science, debunking 20 hair samples is not the same as proving an entire species does not exist. Absence of evidence in a limited sample size is not proof of absence. History actually provides a reason for this persistent hope. Western science once classified the gorilla as an absurd local myth, a wildly exaggerated fireside story. until physical specimens finally proved the locals right. The Himalayas remain one of the last true frontiers on Earth. Its immense scale defies total exploration. A laboratory provides cold, absolute authority over a test tube, but it struggles to compete with the psychological weight of an enduring folklore in a wild, untamed environment. Science can successfully sequence the DNA of a hair sample and prove it belongs to a bear, but it cannot extinguish our deep human desire to believe that mysteries still hide in the dark, unmapped corners of the world.